I'm Diane. I'm 32 years old. For the past 12 years, I've worked at the family business, a packaged food brand named after my parents, though I've always been the one handling the finances. My office is on the second floor, right next to the small meeting room with the old whiteboard where Ethan never finished writing Vision 2020. And on the corner wall still hangs the photo of our family taken at the grand opening of our first facility. I'm at the far edge, holding a folder like some background character without a line. Every morning, I'm the first to arrive. I turn on the printer, make the coffee, strong, low sugar, the kind only I still drink. The clattering sound of that old printer echoes like a familiar heartbeat. And sometimes, I think I love this place, not because it's warm, but because here, I'm the one who keeps everything running on time. I balance the books down to the last cent, every tax filing, every ingredient invoice, every purchase order from our partner supermarkets. I track them all without missing a single day. No days off, no complaints, not even when I was sick or during Thanksgiving. I still came to the office, opened the ledger, checked every number. Once I found an invoice that had a miscategorized item code. It was off by just $17, but I still called to correct it. My father never knew. Ethan didn't care. But I couldn't sleep if the system was even one line off. The fountain pen on my desk, black with silver trim, my name barely visible now after all these years, was the first gift my father gave me when I started working here. "This is your ledger pen," he said, then added something only I heard completely. "Because you're the reliable one." I kept it with me for 12 years, like a silent reminder that even if I'm never in front of the camera, I'm the one holding the stage up from behind. My mother, Margaret, used to tell the neighbors I was the hard-working one, the one who always showed up when the family needed help, but she never once asked what I needed. That day, I was reviewing the accounts when I saw a transaction for $500,000. No invoice, no clear note, just the line, advance for operating costs. The account had been accessed through Ethan's email, my brother. I printed the report, clipped it into a folder, and instead of waiting for tomorrow's finance meeting, I decided to go straight to my parents' house. As I turned onto the old street, the porch light was already on. That amber glow I used to think, as a kid, was my mother's gentle gaze. I turned off the engine, parked a little off to the side, leaving the center spot open, the one Ethan always took. Even when he showed up late, there was always space reserved for him. I walked up the steps with the file in hand, my footsteps falling into the rhythm of everything I knew, the wind rustling through the bougainvillea, the creak of the old door. But just as my hand touched the doorknob, I heard my father's voice, coming from the dining room. "Don't worry, Diane will take care of it. She's never suspected a thing." And I stood still. My heart didn't race, it just stopped. Quiet. As if the last instinct I'd tried so hard to ignore had finally risen up and stared me dead in the face. "You knew. You just didn't want to believe it." I thought I was used to being forgotten, used to standing in the background, quietly cleaning up the messes other people made. I thought I was immune to being hurt, but I wasn't. I stood there, hand still on the doorknob, heart beating slow and heavy, listening to every word leaking through the slightly ajar door. $500,000. She's got enough to cover it, Ethan said, his voice light, like he was talking about someone else's debt. "Diane won't ask. She's never asked." My father, Richard, chuckled softly, then added like it was a rehearsed play, "Just let the error land in the books. A bookkeeping mistake. They were staging a production, and I was the lead, the victim, the scapegoat, a role written from the start." My mother, Margaret, hesitated a moment, then suggested, "Tell her it's to save her position. That's the only way she'll agree." No one asked what I wanted. No one thought I'd ever find out. Ethan even repeated it like a badge of honor. She already gave $2 million for the West Branch, then another $4 million from her inheritance, didn't even check how much equity Dad signed over. And it was true. I handed it over without a signature just because they said, "The family needs you." Then he laughed. "She believes in family. Easy to manipulate." I felt my stomach twist, not because what he said was cruel, but because it was true. I used to believe that family was unshakable, that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, one day I'd be seen. My mother sighed quietly, like something she couldn't hold back, then went silent. No one objected. No one took my side. I had thought, at the very least, she would defend me. But all she asked was, "So when do we tell her?" No one mentioned the work I'd put in over 12 years. No one brought up the fact that I was the only one working through holidays, staying up late to finish monthly reports while Ethan was out gambling. I stepped back. My hand slipped from the doorknob like it had just been pulled from a live wire. I had thought, at the very least, she would stop them. But she had chosen her side. And it wasn't mine. They weren't just planning to blame me. They were planning how to fabricate the paperwork to make it look legitimate. I heard the rustle of documents, Richard's voice directing Ethan, "Change the dates on the receipts. Use Diane's email to resend the cost sheet." I stood there, unmoving, like a stranger in my own home. No one knew I was listening, and even if they had, they probably would have kept going. I stood there frozen, as if every layer of meaning in my life, my work, my role, my dedication, had just been wiped away by a few whispered sentences. Ethan lowered his voice, dripping with mockery. "If she hadn't been dumb enough to believe in blood, we wouldn't have made it this far." I didn't cry. I just felt cold. Not the kind that comes from the night air, but from the voice of the man I used to call my brother. My father whispered to Margaret, "You need to keep your voice soft, talk about job security, about dignity. She folds easy." And in that moment, I understood. Everything I'd given, money, time, loyalty, wasn't seen as sacrifice, just convenience. I was simply the one who never asked. And because I never asked, I became the perfect excuse for them to wash their hands of their own mistakes. I turned away, stepped down the porch, careful not to make a sound. In my hands, the folder was now just evidence. But in my mind, something else had taken shape, not an answer, but a question. If I stay silent this time, what's left of me? I stepped back from the porch like someone waking from a long dream, not because I'd finally woken up, but because I couldn't take it anymore. My hand gripped the payment invoice with Ethan's name on it, the last document that hadn't been altered. No one saw me leave. I drove home in silence. The only sound was the steady hum of the air conditioner blowing against the windshield. When I pulled up in front of my apartment, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Where are you? Dinner's done? We made the chicken you like." As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just heard them build an entire scheme to push me into a pit. I replied, "Something urgent came up. I'm not coming." No exclamation mark. No emotion. I didn't have the strength to pretend anymore. The apartment I'd lived in for over 6 years suddenly felt unfamiliar when I stepped inside. I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood there in the dark, looking out the window at the street shimmering with city lights. And then it became clear to me, they never saw my kindness as something valuable. They saw it as a tool, as obedience, as a habit of not fighting back. They loved me, but only as long as I was useful. I opened my laptop. Next to it was the fountain pen Dad had once given me. I touched the cap gently, then set it aside. For the first time, I didn't use it. For the first time, I wanted to do this with my own hands, without carrying any image of old loyalty. First, the bank. I transferred all my savings to a new account, different bank, different security system. I revoked all secondary access, shut down every joint account I had ever temporarily let them use. Then came the email system, changed passwords, activated two-step verification, removed all unfamiliar devices. Around 3 a.m., I reopened the books. It wasn't just Ethan's transaction. There were other transfers, smaller but regular, going to a secondary account under the name Richard D. Walters, my father. I dug deeper. These entries started 5 years ago, never reported, no original invoices. In the memo line, one note stood out, "Emergency fund, don't let Diane see." I sat up straight. In that moment, I didn't feel sad. I just felt awake, like every layer of illusion had just peeled away. I called the one person who had stood by me without needing an explanation. Laura, my older sister, the one who left this city almost 10 years ago. "You okay?" Her voice was calm, not rushed, not fake. I told her everything, every line I'd heard through the door, every dollar I'd just uncovered. She was quiet, then said, "You finally saw it." I paused. "You knew?" I asked. "I was the first one they used, but I woke up earlier than you." Something inside me cracked and closed at the same time. She told me to write it all down, dates, accounts, signatures, call a lawyer, and if I could, get out. "The London office still needs a finance lead. You could start over." I didn't answer right away, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had a choice. The call came at 8:15 a.m., just as I was making a cup of black tea and watching the morning light filter through the window blinds. Ethan. His name lit up on the screen, clear as a warning, a reminder that everything I learned last night wasn't the end, but the beginning of a confrontation I had avoided for far too long. I stared at the screen flashing his name, my hand tightening briefly before I picked up. "Diane?" His voice still soft, that same casual, calculated tone I used to mistake for affection. "Listen, about last night, it was just a misunderstanding. Mom and Dad were just worried, you know how they get. Everything'll be fine if you just adjust the books, take that line out of the monthly report." I listened without interrupting, letting him slide deeper into the trap of his own delusion, the belief that I was still the same little sister who always tried to make things okay. Ethan went on, slower now. "That thing no one else needs to know, just do what you always do, help the family." I stayed still, then said, calm but cold, "You embezzled $500,000 from the reserve fund, you gambled with company money, and now you want me to cover for it again as if it was just another clerical error." I heard him stall, his voice cracking a little. "You're making this a big deal. We're family." I cut in. "I'm not making it a big deal, Ethan. You did that. I'm not carrying anyone's mistakes anymore, even if they share the name Walters." I hung up. 10 minutes later, my mother showed up at the office. No warning, no appointment. She walked in with swollen eyes and a silk handkerchief clenched in her hand, the one embroidered with a D that I'd given her for her birthday 5 years ago. "Sweetheart," she began, voice shaking, eyes searching mine for softness. "Ethan's a mess right now. He didn't mean to. He's just lost. But he's your brother. You can't let him go to jail over one mistake." I sat behind my desk, arms folded, heart still like a pond just frozen over. I looked at her, the woman who taught me to split portions with my younger brother, to give up my bed in winter, to hold back my feelings for the sake of peace. She sat down across from me, leaning in slightly like she wanted to hug me, like none of this had happened. "Don't you remember how he used to give you part of his cake? You two are siblings." I nodded. "I remember." Then I looked up and, for the first time, said what I'd been holding in for years. "But I also remember that every time Ethan did something wrong, you came to me and told me to let it go, to understand, to take it. So tell me, when did you ever tell Ethan that he had to take responsibility for himself?" She stopped crying. She pulled out the handkerchief, wiped the corner of her eyes, and looked at me like I was a misbehaving child who didn't understand her place. I exhaled slowly. "Mom, the girl you're talking to, the one who always believed, always forgave, always nodded when you cried, she died last night right outside your house." My mother said nothing more. She stood still for a moment, realizing that I probably knew everything. Then she got up and walked out without another word. I watched her go, her ash-gray coat swaying faintly under the fluorescent lights. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother walk away without turning back. When the door closed, I opened my laptop. I began the thing I should have done years ago, backed up all financial data onto a secure drive, reviewed every access I had once marked as temporary, permanently deleted all shared permissions, and transferred the company's reserve fund, the one I had independent control over, into a neutral account monitored by a third party. I didn't do it out of anger. I did it because I needed to end a long chain of compromises I never truly agreed to. That same afternoon, I met with an independent auditor at a small cafe across the street. His name was Mark, around 40, quiet, with the kind of honest eyes I could trust. I handed him the file: unreasonable expenses, internal emails, mismatched payrolls, and a handwritten note from Ethan himself. Mark scanned a few lines, then nodded. "If you're ready, I can start reviewing it tomorrow. This isn't just an internal issue." The next morning I received a letter from the board of directors. My parents, as founding shareholders, had officially filed a complaint against me with the executive committee, accusing me of abuse of power and misappropriating company funds for personal use. I wasn't surprised. I just took a deep breath. They had chosen the path of confrontation, and for the first time, I didn't back down. I called an emergency meeting. The conference room on the 7th floor lit up earlier than usual. Mark presented first, steady voice, clear evidence. Funds moved from company accounts to Ethan's personal account, timestamps aligning with gambling transactions, invoices altered in handwriting that didn't match the official accounting records. Everything was projected on the big screen, line by line, day by day. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't look at my parents. I just sat there, hands on the table, feeling my heartbeat stay steady, even as the room trembled under the weight of the truth. There was no rebuttal from them, no evidence to prove I'd done anything wrong. I didn't raise my voice. I simply opened my laptop, projected the report title on the wall: Internal Misconduct, $512,300. Then I looked straight at them. "I will be resigning from the company. I request the unpaid salary from the past 5 years, approximately $480,000. If necessary, my lawyer will take it to court." The room fell silent, like someone had stopped breathing. I closed my laptop, gathered the documents, and walked out of the room I'd once believed I belonged to. I started packing on a morning without an alarm clock, without the usual packed schedule waiting to be sorted, just a blank space in my mind, and a strange kind of silence rising inside me. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of someone who's finally accepted the truth after too many times denying it. I opened each drawer, touched objects that had once been part of my life. My mother's old cookbook. Its soft, worn cover shaped by the hands that flipped through it dozens of times when I was little. A framed photo of our family under the Christmas tree the year I turned 18. The last time I believed that if I just tried hard enough, I would be seen. I set the book down. I didn't take it with me, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed things that reminded me of a version of myself I didn't want to hold on to. Ethan called as I was labeling the last box. His name lit up on the screen, clear, arrogant, just like the way he's always lived, assuming that if he said sorry, I'd forget everything again. He left a voicemail. His voice wasn't as confident as before, but still carried that same familiar tone. Clever, urgent, but never truly honest. "Diane, I know you're mad, but you're the only one who understands. I messed up, I admit it. But if you leave now, the whole family will fall apart." I stayed silent. No tears, no trembling hands. Only one thing fell. the image of a brother I had once clung to as something sacred. I picked up my phone and recorded a short message, not for revenge, not to manipulate emotions the way he used to, but to close the chapter. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just done hurting myself to hold on to a family that stopped choosing me a long time ago. Before leaving the office, I paused at my desk, the place where I'd once bent over night after night fixing botched reports, balancing numbers others had messed up, and bearing the blame. On the desk was my metal nameplate, Diane Walters, head of finance, still intact, unscratched, but to me it had felt hollow for a long time. I picked it up. It was cold and heavy, like the responsibility I had taken on for far too long. Then I dropped it into the trash can by the door, slowly, as if returning exactly what they'd assigned me, an unpaid role, without a name in the legacy, without a voice in the decisions that mattered. That evening I got a message from my mother. Just 4 words. "I'm sorry, sweetheart." I sat on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes, reading that line over and over. For a moment I thought I might cry, but I didn't. Because I understood, the apology didn't come from recognition, but from fear. Not because they had lost me, but because they had lost the last one willing to absorb it all. I replied simply, "To be forgiven, you need to learn how to be someone worthy of it. Not bitter, not demanding, just the truth." A few weeks later, I arrived in London. The city greeted me with a light rain, just enough to dampen my hair and chill the edge of my coat. I lived in a small 6th-floor apartment, high ceilings, cream-colored walls, a wide window looking out onto a cobbled street, where each morning the chime of trams passed through the glass, blending with the smell of baked goods from the shop across the road and the early coffee aroma like a ritual marking the start of a new life. No one knew who I was here. No one labeled me the second daughter, the family accountant, or the one who never says no. I was just Diane. That was enough. I founded a small consulting firm using the reserve funds, the only money still legally under my control. The company had no flashy signs, no glass-walled offices, but every number there was clean, every signature voluntary, and everyone I worked with understood exactly where the value of transparency lies. I walked more. Each afternoon I picked a spot by the Thames, bought a coffee, and sat reading the books. This time, my books, not anyone else's. I no longer had to strain to prove myself. I no longer had to carry for anyone. I simply did my job and was paid exactly what I was worth. A few months after I left, a relative emailed me an update on the family company. The auditors dug deeper and uncovered more unauthorized expenses by Ethan. He was fined $250,000, ordered to repay everything he'd withdrawn, removed from the board, and faced a suspended sentence for financial fraud. My parents sold the old house, the one where the amber porch light once glowed every night, to pay for legal fees, and moved into a rental apartment in the suburbs. They kept to themselves, rarely speaking with extended family. I read the email and closed my laptop. No satisfaction, no pain, just a quiet space. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I knew I had offered enough chances to make things right for long enough, and it was time for what's wrong to face its own consequences. One early winter evening, I sat by the window with a glass of red wine, listening to the rain tapping gently on the glass. I remembered that night, the night I stood outside the boardroom door, listening to my own parents plan how to blame me, and I realized that what hurt most wasn't that they betrayed me. It was that I once believed they never would. I pulled from my coat pocket an old notebook, the one I had carried for 12 years, where I logged every expense, every instruction from my parents, every little note like March report, Ethan missing invoice. The ink had faded over time. I flipped to the last page and wrote a single line, "The day I stopped living to protect others and started living to protect myself." I closed the notebook, placed it in a drawer, not taking it with me, but not throwing it away either. Because the past isn't something you need to erase, you just need to know where to leave it. I used to think family was a reason to sacrifice, but now I know sometimes family isn't blood. It's the place where you don't have to check receipts when someone says, just borrowing. It's where your name doesn't get quietly removed from the legacy, the list, or the love. I've learned that love without respect is just another kind of debt. And you don't have to spend your life paying off the emotional invoices someone else handed you. Leaving sometimes it's not because you're weak. It's because you're strong enough not to stay. If you've ever stood in front of a door, holding hope in your hands and realized the truth behind it was unbearable, believe me, you don't owe anyone an explanation for turning away. You don't owe anyone an apology for saving yourself. I spent my youth waiting for the word sorry, but in the end I realized what I truly needed was a silence wide enough to begin living as my own.